USA 1. Everett Jasmer's on the line. Everett, how are we doing tonight?
Very good. Good evening, Ross, Tyson, and monster truck fans around the world.
Everett, it's great to have you on the show. Ever since Roller and I first started working on this thing a couple years ago, and we started talking about all the interviews it would be great to do and all the great people it would be just amazing to have on the line for a full hour to hear their stories and hear all about their career in monster trucks. One of the names we always thought of was Everett Jasmer, USA 1, and it just couldn't be more special for that to finally happen here tonight. We're less than 2 weeks away from this grand event. Monster Trucks finally has a Hall of Fame, a museum. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's very cool. It's what is this, going on 35 years of the sport or more, 35 plus years. And no, that's very exciting, very humbling, and thank you to all of you folks who put together the Hall of Fame, and I'm very honored.
Well, it really is special, and ever since Jeff Cook there in Auburn had that opportunity come up with Dean Cruz there in town, this famous car collector who's got all these great museums, and they get together to start out this monster truck deal, and it's just amazing how things have come together. Saturday was the last chance for people to get tickets for the event, and it looks like we're gonna have a crowd somewhere in the range of 150, 200 people on hand, which in this sport for a special event like this, away from a show, that's a pretty incredible crowd. There's going to be people from the earliest of days all the way up until current. It's going to be a real neat chance for you guys, I think, to get together and see a lot of people you probably haven't seen in a lot of years, don't you think?
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting, not only to see some of the older guys, old coots like me, but it's going to be fun to meet a lot of new fans, too.
Well, now, Everett, we talked about how it's great that Monster Trucks is finally having this opportunity to have their history honored like this, but when you sit back and you look at all the great people who've been in monster trucks over the years, from, the promoters to the owners to the drivers, and you come to that first thing, it's always a special moment in every sport when they look back to say, who's going to be in this first class for the Hall of Fame? And, with NASCAR, you're talking about guys like Richard Petty, and Dale Earnhardt and Bill France. And then it comes down to monster trucks. How much of an honor is it for you, Everett Jasmer, to be in this first class for the Monster Truck Hall of Fame with names like Bob Chandler and Jeff Dane? How cool is that, and how has that honor been for you this year since that's come about?
You would have to come up with the one question that is going to be difficult to answer. It's hard to put words to it. It's been very, like I said, very humbling and exciting since I first heard that it was coming down the pike, and of course now it's starting to hit home, only a week and a half away, less than 2 weeks away. I don't know that anybody can aptly describe the feeling. I suppose everybody's got a little different way of feeling about it, but it is mostly humbling, but very exciting.
Well, yeah, definitely understandable. It's hard to put something like that into words, but the neat opportunity of tonight for me, covering monster trucks for several years now, and the great thing I've always thought that this show brought to the sport is, Monster Jam's still on TV these days, and there's some online coverage and different things out there that you can find coverage of monster trucks, but you don't ever really get the chance to get someone from Monster Trucks and just get them on the for a good hour-long interview and hear some of the stories that probably haven't been told in many years. And so tonight is a great opportunity for all of us fans to hear from you, one of the sports legends. And I think one of the best ways to start something like this is right from the beginning. So let's go back to way back when you first started getting into motorsports, even before the monster truck days. I understand you were real big into drag racing for some time before monster trucks came about.
Yeah, I was starting to get involved in drag racing, and technically, before that, even just hot rodding and street riding and things like that. But I was getting into drag racing by the time I was 17, 18 years old, and to this day, it still is a very intriguing motorsport to me. I follow it on TV as much as I can. Don't get to too many national events, but I still love drag racing. But obviously, the last 30 plus years have been occupied by monster trucks.
Now, how far along did you get in your drag racing career before you started hearing about monster trucks, and how did that interest in this new 4x4 truck and the early days of monster trucks come about for you?
Well, as I said, I was drag racing late '60s, early '70s, just for probably 2 or 3 years only, as a youngster, late teens, and around 20 years old, and have always been intrigued by motorsports and cars and horsepower and whatever. And then in the early '70s, I phased out. Well, I just my partner and I had a good friend who was the money guy. I didn't have any money to build or to race car. All I had was my what I call my wacky racer street cars. Met a fellow who wanted to go drag racing. He had the money to do it, and we went drag racing. And I did the wrenching and the driving. And but then in the early '70s, I had a performance shop going, and got away from the drag racing a little bit, and then eventually bought my first four-wheel drive pickup in '74. I bought what is today the first USA One truck, the '70 Chevy, and I think within a few days of buying it, I was trying to figure out. You got to keep in mind there wasn't even such a thing as lift kits and big wheels and tires. The four-wheel drive market was in its infancy back then. The only people who had four-wheel drive were, ex-military people with old military Jeeps, or farmers who had a Scout or a vehicle like that. Four-wheel drives were not a commonplace item back then, and I bought my '70, and I think within a few days I was trying to figure out how to lift it higher and put bigger tires on it, keeping in mind that big tires back then, the biggest thing known to man was a 1200 16.5. So I think I just spaced up under the springs a little bit, and enough to get those 1200 16.5s on with special rims, and that was, I suppose, I didn't know it at the time, but it was the beginning.
Now, at this time, is that when you started to, as your truck started to draw some interest, is that when you kind of got the vision that, this 4x4 deal would start to take off and started transitioning your shop over into doing more 4x4 type work?
Yeah, I actually, I would say within a year or two, I was just tinkering with my own truck, doing what I could. But by the mid '70s, it was real quickly becoming evident that the four-wheel drive market was going to be a big thing, and so I just kept modifying my own truck and playing with it. And then by the later '70s, there was enough interest in the four-wheel drive market, and everyday people were buying four-wheel drives, and soon looking to modify them like I was doing to mine. And then the suspension companies came along, and so I started a business in the late '70s, and started doing everything from regular mechanical work to custom building and suspensions and lift kits, wheels, tires, all that type of stuff. And literally within probably '78, '79 into the early '80s, within 3 or 4 years, the four-wheel market boomed, and so did we. And then,
so at
quite
what point,
by accident,
as this is all going on, you're working in the daytime, full time working on vehicles and all this, and on the weekends, is that when you started kind of getting into some of the mud bogs and going out and really testing to see what the truck could do?
Yeah, here in Minnesota, there was everything from mud bogs to club four-wheel drive events with hill climbs and sand drags and all types of trail rides and everything. So the four-wheel drive activities were quite diverse, and of course I was interested in the mud end of it, and so kept building the truck bigger, and bigger tires would go on, and then you'd have to come up with bigger driveline parts because they'd be breaking, and then you'd have to have more horsepower, and you'd start the circle again.
Now, at what point did you start kind of hearing stories about, through the magazines and that about, Bob Chandler, Bigfoot, Jeff Dane, King Kong, and seeing what some of these guys were starting to do? And is that kind of what got you started and going even further with the truck?
Well, it's hard to put a finger on it. I was already, stretching things as far as I could with my truck when I first saw I think I saw a trade magazine of some sort, if I remember, had a picture of Bigfoot on it, and it was the Midwest four-wheel drive Ford at the time, and I think he had the 48-inch tractor tires on it then. And then by the next summer, he ended up coming to Minnesota to a four-wheel drive event, and I met him there, and we that was our first personal meeting. And
I've heard the story there on that event a couple times before, and I think that'll kind of be a good one to go through. This is the first time you've heard a lot about Bigfoot and Bob Chandler, and this is the first time you with your own truck that was definitely a lot further along than all the other trucks that were out there. So you and Bob get together for the first time. Tell us a little bit about that first meeting.
Well, I drove about must be almost 200 miles to northern Minnesota, actually closer to my hometown area. But from the Twin Cities, I drove, I think it was about 200 miles north to a club four-wheel drive event that they had paid Bob to come up there and make a pass through a swamp. They were literally out there when we got there in the morning, cutting down cattails, cutting a path across this swamp, and it was water standing in it, and it was a long ways across. And I pulled in, and Bob's truck was on the trailer behind his motorhome, and I pulled up right next to it, parked, and greeted him, and we became friends within minutes, it seems like I remember. And as the day went on, he was supposed to do his exhibition later in the day, and as we got closer and closer to the time, he started prodding me and insisting that I go through the mud with him. Now, I didn't have nearly as big a tires on at that time, and I didn't have nearly as much horsepower at that time. But he prodded, and he prodded, and he prodded, and eventually a young, silly fool decided to put his 70 Chevy in, and so the only thing I made him agree to was that I get to make the first pass because I didn't want to be following in his ruts. So and of course it was extra fun because it was up close to my home country, and a lot of my old friends from years past were there, yelling and screaming and hollering, and I staged it up and hit the nitrous, and somehow or other I went across, and I don't know how to this day I did it, but I did. And then Bob followed me, and of course by this time the adrenaline was flowing, and I probably lost all rational consciousness, and so when he said, "Let's do it again."
Well, I'll tell you what, Everett, we got to go to a break right now. We're going to go to some of the commercials, but as soon as we get back, we're going to find out more about that first meeting between USA 1 and Bigfoot. We're talking to Everett Jasmer on Monster Truck Radio. On Monster Truck Radio, Ross Bonar filling in for Roller tonight as we talk to monster truck legend Everett Jasmer. Lugnuts keep sending in those questions for Everett Jasmer. We'll definitely get to them as we go through the interview. We're still in the early days of USA 1 right now. We're talking about the first meetup between USA 1 and Bigfoot. Now, Everett, you're telling the story. We just heard USA 1 makes it through. Well, it wasn't even USA 1 back then, but you make it through the bog. Your first time meeting Bigfoot. Bigfoot follows you through. Tell us what happens next.
Well, you sure do know how to pick a spot for a commercial. Keep the fans listening anyway. Keep them on their toes here. We got to the other side.
Sure they keep coming back.
Yeah, you bet. I don't know that it was planned that way, but it worked out good. Got to the other side, and of course, I think I had lost control of what I was doing. The adrenaline was flowing so heavily. Bob suggested that we go again, and of course I was less reluctant because there was some nasty ruts across that swamp by that time. And but at that point there was no stopping, so I turned around. I did it again, and he did it again, and I don't recall the exact number. I think there was at least 3 passes each. At which time I said, this poor old Chevy's got to drive 200 miles back home. I better not destroy it. So I parked it, and so Bob suggested to me that I hop in with him, and he was going to give the fans a little extra show, and he put it in 2-wheel drive.
Oh, wow.
He made it about 3/4 of the way across, and it sunk, and then he put it in four-wheel drive, and it wouldn't come out of it. And so, as you might imagine, the adrenaline was probably running twice as fast by this time, riding with him, and then him being stuck. And all I remember is I jumped into the swamp and ran for my truck, and backed up to the edge of the swamp, and threw my strap out, and he threw his strap out, and we hooked them together, and I got to pull him out that day, which, to me, obviously, I suppose I'm biased by it being an important part of my life, but I think it was one of the key moments in the early days of monster trucks. A lot of people have argued and haggled about who was first at this and who was first at that. Quite honestly, I've never got into those arguments. I never cared much, but it's hard to put a finger on when it all started. But I think that was a pivotal moment in the history of monster trucks.
Well, you definitely got all this. What's that?
I've never showed them to anybody, but I've got pictures of all that.
Right. Well, that would be a great thing to have.
They're probably on 110 film, but and I know most of the youngsters out there don't know what that is. But.
That had to be, like you said, it's a big moment in monster truck history, but it had to be a real big turning point for you. I mean, you're already working on the truck, building it up, but now at this point, you've went up, and not necessarily in competition with, but you've been there performing with Bigfoot, and you pulled him out of a bog. So at that point, you had to be gung-ho and ready for the next step with the truck.
You betcha. No, we were just having fun, and I've never thought of it as anything else. But I know it was an important time for me, and I would assume for the whole sport.
So what happens next? I mean, you're riding high. This is a big moment. And if I remember the story right, you actually got a plaque from the organizers of the event. What was on that?
It was a small wooden plaque with a brass plate, and it said something to the effect, and I'm not in my office right now. It said something to the effect, thanks for helping pull Bigfoot out, I think, but I don't remember the exact wording on it. It was very simple. It was, and it was partly because the club up there knew who I was. They just gave me a little plaque to thank me for doing that.
So some big moments there, a lot of encouragement. What's the next step in the story for Everett Jasmer?
Oh, I don't remember some of the next the next few months or during the next year. Obviously, the truck grew bigger. I do remember I bought a set of those 48-inch tractor tires from Bob. I think they were the set that he had on when he had on duals, if I'm not mistaken. And I used those for a little while, and then I was visiting him another time, and he was showing me this great big two big hunks of iron that he had bought that he thought they were 2 5-ton Rockwells. He had the 2.5 tons in his trucks, and he had decided that he wasn't going to use them. He thought they were too big and too heavy. So I bought them, dragged them home, and a few months later they were under the 70 with the 48-inch Terra tires. So the exact days and weeks and months that went by, I'm not sure, but that was the next step.
Now, what point are we getting into the part where you're going to star in your first movie here?
Well, actually, the first movie was Take This Job and Shove It, and that was in between there. As I said, I have trouble remembering the actual sequence, but now that you asked the question, the 70 still had the 48-inch tractor tires on it when we did the movie Take This Job and Shove It, and I suppose it would have been right after that the truck got torn down to the bare frame and completely reconstructed with the 5 tons and 48-inch Terras.
Now, how did that whole deal come about with the movie shoot? And just tell us a little bit about that experience, because that had to be a pretty neat deal for someone who'd kind of done a little drag racing, and this monster truck thing's first now taken off, and all of a sudden you're driving around in a major motion picture.
was pretty exciting. That was another opportunity that Bob brought to the table, and asked, or at least suggested to the producer that he contact me for another one of the trucks, and so I have him to thank for that, of course. He was always busier doing that type of promotion with the movie people. I was a much smaller operation and just busy building my truck all the time. So when that phone call came, I was very pleased and thankful for it, and it obviously did us both a lot of good. The movie was fun to make. We shot it in our part of it in Dubuque, Iowa, and I think we were down there for a week at one point. And if I'm not mistaken, a few days later on, I had two of my trucks in there. My street truck, the silver '79 Chevy called the Silver Bullet, and then the what would be the USA 1 truck was another character in there, but it didn't take part in the race. It was on the starting line, but the reason for it to be in it was scripted to break down right on the starting line, and they had another use for it. And, if anybody watches the movie and they watch real closely, they'll see that the in-cab shots of the fellows driving the Bigfoot truck are actually shot in the 70s.
Wow,
a couple of
pretty
reasons
neat
for that,
stuff.
but it had to do with being able to mount cameras in certain locations and things like that. And so if you look real carefully when what was his name? Robert, forget his name, the star and his two friends, fellow that did the airplane movies. I'm just drawing a blank right now. But when the three of them are in the cab, when they have in-cab shots of them driving the Bigfoot truck, they're actually in the 70s. And I don't think most fans know that. So that'd be an interesting piece of trivia for people to look back at the movie.
Definitely, and we're talking about these pivotal moments in the early days of monster trucks, and as we move through it from the first time that Bigfoot and the eventual USA 1 meet up to Take This Job and Shove It movie. Tell us about as the car crushing phase started to begin with Bob and Jeff Dane both doing that. When was the first time, and kind of give us some of the background to the first time that you crushed cars in one of your trucks?
I don't remember the date again, but it was within a few months of that sequence there when Bob and Jeff and everybody else was trying it. And I just got a call from a local fair promoter within 30, 40, 50-mile radius here that not a fair, wasn't a fair promoter. It was just a promoter that was going to put on some small event, and he obviously had seen that monster trucks were crushing cars. He was wondering if I could, and so I agreed to do it, and I did my first car crush with the 48-inch tires on. As I recall, there was very few people in the grandstands. But it was the first time. I think there's
that had to really blow away the people that were there. I mean, at this point, you'd have to be one of a select few fans out there who'd really ever seen a truck crush cars before. So, what was some of the reaction that you remember getting the first couple times you did this for people?
Well, mostly just people didn't believe it could be done, and they were shocked to see how easily relatively easily. Of course, the big tires and the big engine help, but most people just were plain shocked that we could drive over cars like that. We obviously went in the beginnings. We went over them from trunk to hood or whatever. It was easier to do that way if you had two cars lined up and went over the trunk and then the roof. But everybody was always shocked.
Well, now you've got the 48-inch tires on, and you started crushing cars. Well, we're going to go ahead and go to a commercial break here, pay some bills, and when we come back, we're going to talk about one of the first big TV appearances as Bigfoot and USA 1 went head-to-head on That's Incredible, the TV show. That story and much more with Everett Jasmer, USA 1, coming up after these messages. This Monster Truck Radio, great show tonight as we got one of the legends, Everett Jasmer, interviewing with us here this evening. It's the second to last program for Monster Truck Radio on Castle Rock Radio. Fans, do not miss next week when Roller does his farewell show with Bob Chandler of Bigfoot. It's the last show on the road to the Hall of Fame. Hey, Roller's in the audience tonight. Lug nuts, be sure to say hey to him on the Ustream chat there. Well, we're back with Everett Jasmer. We've been talking about all these huge moments in the early days of monster trucks, and this has got to be one of the biggest that we're coming up on here now. I mean, it's probably recognized as maybe one of the first ever competitive races in monster trucks. It's when Bob Chandler, Bigfoot, and you with USA 1 meet for the That's Incredible TV show. Tell us a little bit about how this deal came about.
First, you mentioned Roller. Roller, if you're listening, I hope you're doing well. Sorry you couldn't be on the show tonight. Get well soon.
Roller just had something come up today. You know, we miss him for sure. It's been great having him all these years with Monster Truck Radio, but you know, we're having a good time, and he says thanks on the Ustream chat there, and he says he's really enjoying hearing from Everett Jasmer.
Well, back to That's Incredible. Another thank you to Bob Chandler. He's the one that got me involved in that also. It was a great opportunity, probably one of the biggest opportunities for us and the monster truck world as far as getting exposure. I would say that was probably the one single biggest piece of promo or whatever you might call it to really kick off the monster truck thing. Because after that, the bookings from everything from promoters to car shows to just about everything went kind of crazy after that. But that was quite an event. As I was literally telling somebody about it today, a fan stopped by, and as I remember, I was in the process of rebuilding the truck again to put the 66-inch tires on it, and Bob called, said he had recommended to the producer of that TV show to give me a call, and then of course he called me. But as I remember, when I got the call, the truck was in pieces and being reconstructed with all new suspension to put the 66s under, and I had the new Midwest aluminum wheels being custom built. I didn't have them yet. I had the tires sitting there. I had the truck in pieces. I was having the trailer modified to haul the tires, and so we're in kind of a transition stage. And the phone rings, and Bob says, "We got this That's Incredible thing coming, and would I like to do it?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "When?" And the panic set in because it was only a few weeks away. So I remember discussing it this afternoon with someone, and because we're in the process of remounting those aluminum wheels right now, the last few days here. We're going to bring those out of hibernation. And
oh wow!
Yeah. And I remember the panic that set in and the amount of work I did in just a few weeks' time to get ready for that. The funny, almost funny. It wasn't to me at the time, but I had to do what I had to do. I had the trailer modified. It was an open gooseneck trailer, and I had a upper deck built on it over the forward part of it, over the gooseneck to haul the tires on. And we ran out of time. We got the wheels, we got them mounted, we got the truck done, and literally used a forklift or something from a neighboring business to set the tires up on the deck and strap them down, and went to the racetrack there at East St. Louis, I believe it was, and had never bolted the tires on the truck or tested it in any way, shape, or form. We didn't have time. We barely got there. In fact, we rolled in the morning and didn't have a way of getting the tires off. I pulled up next to Bob's trailer, and they used their crane off of their trailer to swing over to the side and unload my tires, and I bolted them on the 70 for the first time ever with those new Midwest wheels, which nobody had ever seen before. And so it was exciting, and yet I didn't even know if the truck would work. And ironically, it didn't work real well because it didn't perform real well over the cars, and Bob beat me.
Well, that's one of the great parts about this really is, a lot of folks, of course, have seen that, great moment, but to hear the backstory behind it is so neat. And that's the first time the truck was ever on 66-inch tires, and you've got to race Bigfoot on national television. Definitely
right.
Probably some butterflies going on as you guys lined up for that one.
Butterflies would be putting it more than mildly, yeah. It was a great adventure, though, and it paid off real well.
Yeah, you get done with this, and then all of a sudden, as you mentioned, bookings are going crazy, big demand, and this was a huge step for monster trucks. Well, coming up just not too greatly long later, I'm sure you guys, doing shows and all this, but one of the moments people recognize most is in '85 when, the big battle of the monster trucks happened down at the Superdome. And this was one of the first big meetings of the trucks to really race side by side. And how neat was it to be a part of that first experience?
That was a very exciting experience because of the nature of the show and the people doing the show, and they were giving us a chance to race. And sadly, if I remember, I think I choked. I did something wrong. I can't remember what it was. I didn't win anyway, but that happened.
Well, it's definitely, a big moment between, yourself there, Bob Chandler there, the Danes with Awesome Kong there, and this big moment. And you being a racer in the past, and, of course, we know Everett Jasmer has always kind of been the more racing focused. Now, things are starting to progress. There's more interest in having these trucks actually race side by side rather than just the exhibition performing. Tell us a little bit of what you remember as this evolution continued before we get to that first year of the big TNT Championship Series.
Well, you're right. I was by the time we got to the mid '80s, there I was gung ho that pushing promoters and everybody else saying we had to develop a racing series, because I really believed, as much as I enjoyed what we did early on, I really believed that we needed some form of competition to keep the sport progressing. Exhibition was great. We did gain a lot of popularity and a lot of fans, and did very well business-wise. But I knew that if we were going to become a motorsport, we had to have some form of competition. So, like I say, I had been pushing real hard for that, and there was a number of promoters, particularly TNT, I think, that were staging competition individually at events, but I didn't feel that was enough, and so I kept talking to people and encouraging people to start a racing series. And then in 1987, Chevrolet was early in '87. Chevrolet was releasing the new '88 body style, and they approached me about building a new '88 monster truck, and they started. I agreed to do it, and they started supplying everything I needed that they could supply, body parts, springs, whatever we could use from their inventory as part of our deal. And so in early '87, I started building the new '88 truck with the hopes of a racing series. So I designed it for racing at that time anyway, and did a lot of things with the truck that hadn't really been done on any other monster trucks at the time. And some of the innovations I came up with were scrutinized, even laughed at a little bit, but they worked. And a couple of the items that I put into use on that truck were heavily requested within a few months as we started racing.
Well, now, take a step back
leading
real quick,
up to the '88 season.
Yeah, and this kind of actually ties in a little bit with a question Roller just had on the Ustream chat. You mentioned how you kind of started building this truck, with some of these ideas specifically for should a race series start to come about, and you kind of took a gamble in doing that. Is it because you knew that you guys were really onto something after you did that first big race down there in Louisiana?
Well, I don't know if I thought about it that way. I was just determined it was going to happen. I don't know if I suppose that's all part of it. I don't remember thinking directly that was the beginning of it. I just knew we had to have a racing series, and as everybody out there, well, not everybody, a lot of the older fans remembers, I've never been one to go with the flow, and that's maybe good, maybe bad. I'm not going to brag about it. It's just the way I am. But I was just, in my mind, I had my mindset that there was going to be a racing series, and I built that truck all through the summer and fall of '87, hoping that there would be a racing series. And then as we finished the truck right at the end of the year around Christmas time, I guess it would have been maybe even early December as the truck was getting done, Chevrolet came back to me and said they were excited about the progress I had made in finishing the truck, and they requested the truck's use in the new car auto shows in January, February, and March of '88. And obviously I couldn't turn them down. They were a sponsor. They wanted the truck. They had supplied a lot of what it took to build the truck, and I didn't have anything else booked for the truck, so I signed about a 3-month deal with Chevrolet to tour the truck at the new car auto shows, and shortly after that, the announcement was made by TNT that they were going to have a racing series starting in January, and all I remember was my heart just sank because there was nothing I could do to be a part of that racing series that I had been hounding everybody to do for so long. So we had to complete our obligations to Chevrolet. I had other bookings with the 70, and I wouldn't have put that in a racing series anyway. And then in April, when my obligations to Chevrolet were done, I decided that to join the TNT series. Chevrolet was sponsoring the TNT series also, and they wanted me there. So we just...
Well, I'll tell you what, Everett, let's go ahead and get this last commercial break in here, pay some more bills for Castle Rock, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Everett more about sponsorship, that iconic USA 1 paint job, and the first national champion coming from behind in that first year of the TNT Racing Series. All that and much more with Everett Jasmer coming up next on Monster Truck Radio. Monster Truck Radio. We're on tonight with the legendary Everett Jasmer. Everett, the hour goes by so fast. This is an interview we've been wanting to do for so long, and we're coming to one of had to be the biggest moments for you, definitely one of the biggest moments in early monster truck history. This, you've already told the story about how you've had to sit out the first 3 months of that first TNT Championship Series, doing the displays. When you got to do that first race there in April, you're wanting to get in there and start making some waves, start winning some races, but did you really think that you had a shot at the championship starting out that far behind?
Well, a number of things happened. First of all, knowing that we had missed out on a fourth, maybe even a third of the season, I don't remember numerically because there was a lot of events went down in January, February, and March already. I told the guys that we were just going to give it our all and do the best we could, concentrate on getting ready for the next season. With undoubtedly no chance at all of catching up in the points, and but I said, we're gonna just go out there and do the best we can do, and then I drove the truck in the first 2 races. It was unquestionably the hottest thing out there. All my dreams had come true. There was now a racing series. I now had the new hottest truck out there. But 2 races in, I suddenly realized there was a problem, and the problem was me. The business had grown so big, and I was, of course, the type of guy that had to do everything himself. So I was, building and designing and running 2 businesses, the 4-wheel drive shop and the monster truck business, trying to drive, doing everything myself. And 2 races in, I realized that I was making some very silly driving errors, and of course, being a drag race driver and driven everything I owned my whole life, I had to make the toughest decision of my life, and yet it turned out to be the best one, because I sat down with Rod and asked him if he would take on the driving position. He was young, he was single, he had only one thing on his mind, and instead of me with 1,000 things on my mind. And it turned out to be, like I said, the toughest decision of my life, and yet the best decision of my life when I put Rod Litzow behind the wheel, because he not only went out and won like crazy, but by about mid-season, all of a sudden, to my surprise, we were winning so much that we were in second place, challenging Bigfoot. And that's when the fire really got lit, and we poured more coals to it, and last race of the season, we overcame Bigfoot and won that championship.
Hey, you've done it. This is the first ever time you've beat impossible odds, and you've become the first team to ever win a national championship in monster trucks. This is definitely one of the most pivotal moments, in monster truck history. What else going through your mind at this point? I mean, you've been building towards this moment, and then you've achieved it. That had to be just incredibly special for you guys.
Well, it was. Obviously, it was unexplainable. But as much as I was excited about winning that first national championship, and quite honestly, there is something very special about that. There'll never be another first one. So that was real special. But in my mind, bigger than that was, I thought we had started a new motorsport. I didn't ever expect it to be an NHRA or a NASCAR, but I thought we had started a new motorsport, monster truck racing. And so as much as winning was great, I thought starting a new motorsport was even greater. And then things didn't go quite the way I planned from there on. and a lot of the fans.
Well, that story, in recent years, we've talked about that. You've done a lot of interviews as to, how you didn't really agree with where the sport went, kind of in the years following that. But as we're kind of running a little low on time, let's get to a couple of the Ustream chat questions here. One of the users really wants to know, everyone's kind of seen the pictures of that prototype of the SST toy truck. A lot of folks had the Bigfoot one back then, and you've got one of the only ones of the USA one version ever produced. Talk to us a little bit about that deal and what ended up happening there.
Well, I do have the only one. After doing the Bigfoot monster truck, they wanted to do the USA one monster truck, and quite honestly, that was part of the transition to the new pearl white paint scheme with the new graphics back in early '80s. There, I forget what year that was, because they had already produced the Bigfoot play school toy, and they wanted to do USA one next in the monster truck line. And they weren't about to make another blue model or toy. So they suggested changing colors. I didn't like that idea at all, because I had been blue up till then all the time, and I didn't like. They wanted red or white, and I didn't like red, and I wasn't fond of white. But then I remembered one of my early street cars and race cars was a Corvette that was pearl, and I thought, I love pearl, so I went with the blue pearl paint scheme, and the toy company had white, and I had pearl, and everybody was happy. But in the process of the many months of negotiating the deal, and then prototype work going on, and whatever, as the months passed, Play School got bought out, I believe, by Hasbro, and Hasbro decided not to continue that line, and so I ended up with the only one in the world that's on display in my office, the prototype.
Well, now, Everett, there's so many more things I'd love to talk about with you, but as we kind of get down here to the last few minutes of this, and, you have to feel privileged to have worked with some just incredible people over the years. Rod Litzow, you look back to the early days, and he's definitely recognized as one of the wildest racers out there, incredible success. Steve Wilkie. Just talk about some of the great people that were a part of the USA One operation, through your career.
Well, there was a lot of people. Obviously, some of them were employees of my four-wheel drive shop. Some of them were kind of dual employees, and whether it was the guys in the shop or the guys that were on the road or the drivers, they were all important. Like you mentioned, Rod and Steve. Sadly, we lost Steve here about 3 years ago, but the guys back at the shop were just as important. Without them, the trucks wouldn't have gotten built. I couldn't do it all myself anymore. So everybody played a very important role. You don't know all their names, but they were all important.
Now, this coming up next, November the 19th, the first induction ceremony. This has got to be pretty special for all those people, and as I understand it, there's a lot of folks coming out to see your induction.
Yeah, we got quite a group coming from my area here, and there's a number of people coming from other parts of the country to be with USA One, fans and friends of mine. And I'm hoping very much. I've invited and got a verbal commitment to, I'm going to bring up a name here that some people may or may not know about. I've invited Chandler Lloyd, who is the gentleman who is going to be in the next couple of years here, become the new owner of USA One, a deal that I struck with him this year. He's coming from South Carolina, hopefully, and so hopefully we'll get to meet and greet a lot of people and introduce people to Chandler also.
Well, in a way, because of that coming about, this is almost just another exciting kicking point to what could be another great new life for USA One coming up. But
hey, Ross,
as we
have
talk
a
about
guest.
this stuff,
we have a guest. We have a guest on the show.
Go ahead, Tyson.
They're on the phone.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, caller.
Hey,
hello.
Hey, EJ, it's Roller. How's it going?
Hey, Roller, how are you? What's up, buddy?
You know what, man? You know what, Ross? How's it going? Great show. You guys are doing a great job down there, man. I just wanted to ask you a question, Everett. What's it mean to you to be picked for the Hall of Fame?
You're breaking up a little bit. To do what?
He said, what would it mean to you to be with Bigfoot Hall of Fame?
Once again, to do what with Bigfoot? To be with Bigfoot?
What does it mean to have you in the Hall of Fame?
Well, it's as I said at the beginning. I don't have words for it. It's humbling. It's exciting. It's pretty unexplainable, but it's going to be a great time.
Well, I didn't hear the first question. I'm sorry. I re-asked the question again. I wasn't on.
No,
so,
that's quite all right.
Say hi to Go ahead.
Well, that's okay, Roller.
I'm glad you got on here.
The most exciting parts about this deal coming up next week, and Everett, you said it's not 100% sure, but it's awfully darn close. Tell us, you're bringing something that I think fans everywhere are just going to be incredibly excited to see to the Hall of Fame event. What's your big surprise that is almost 100% you're going to be bringing with you to the Hall of Fame event?
Well, if everything goes as planned, I'm going to be bringing the 70 out of hibernation, and that I dropped a little hint earlier. We're mounting up the aluminum wheels on tires this week, and if everything goes well, I'll have the 70 USA One at the event.
That's one of the coolest parts about this. It may have been a long time since you've been involved with the trucks, but you've kept them in pristine condition there at the shop, and I have a feeling the truck's going to look every bit as good as it did back in the 80s, seeing it there at the Hall of Fame event. And for me, someone who's been such a big fan of monster trucks for all these years, it's going to be a really special moment and a great treat for everyone coming out on the 19th.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Is Roller
well,
still
now,
with us?
Everett, like I told you before, this is one of the interviews that Roller and I wanted for so long to get on the show, so I can't thank you enough for being on the show with us here as part of the Road to the Hall of Fame.